but we want to work with nature. So what is it that inspired Maria Montessori so deeply that she decided to dedicate herself solely to the children, leaving and abandoning her other work? Which we know. She trained as a doctor. She worked as a doctor. She actually had an interest in psychiatry. The thesis that she had to write when she was doing her medical training was actually called Antagonistic Hallucinations. So you can see it's very much psychiatric in nature. Anyway, leaving her work as a doctor, leaving, as I said, her work as a university lecturer, etc., and wanting to dedicate herself totally to children, right? And it's of course because of that she was able to leave an enormous legacy of work that all of us benefit from. A legacy which includes her overall view of development as represented here. So that's the question. And the answer is, it was those children, those first children, as I say, the children of the first Casa dei Bambini, think of it as San Lorenzo, particular neighborhood of Rome. It's the San Lorenzo children, right? It's those children, you know, where the ones I indicated before, the ones that were present for that official inauguration, January 6, 1907. And she writes about those children at length in The Secret of Childhood. And by the way, when Montessori would choose her own titles for books, they're always significant titles. Even the titles of her books were thinking about The Secret of Childhood. And now, if I can manage to click this thing. Oh no, go the wrong way. No, it's not working. I can't get the next slide. I don't want that one, sorry. This one. Can you see what's written there? I mean, you can just, can you see? All right, now I need to actually see that. I can't see it well on the screen, so I'm going to take my page here. Right. She talks about these first children in, as I said, The Secret of Childhood. And this slide is actually a photograph of a page that I have in my table of contents of a very old version of an Indian edition of The Secret of Childhood. And on this page, you can see where she actually lists various discoveries that she made with children. Right? So she's really involved in the work of observation with children. What was her interest anyway? Given that she was a medical doctor, given that she was doing this kind of so-called high-status work and so on, what made her interested in taking over, agreeing to supervise this first children's house, right? I mean, we're thinking of Rome, we're thinking of a very poor neighborhood. I mean, in England we refer to it as a slum neighborhood of very poor people who were often without employment or seeking day employment, you know, day by day, abandoning their children, living in these big blocks that were originally constructed in the building boom, where well-off families were supposed to live, and then they were abandoned. People just started moving in, and then there was subletting and subletting, and so on and so forth. And it was a very unsalubrious part of Rome. Montessori said, well-off people only saw this part of Rome when they were accompanying someone to the cemetery, because it was on the road to the cemetery. Otherwise, it's a part of Rome that they would never go to. But the company had decided to take it on. The Rome sort of real estate company decided to take on these tenements and renovate them to make them suitable for families of very modest incomes. Right? So they really renovated them, made small apartments, each one of which was self-contained in terms of amenities and so on. They favoured families, so children and they needed all these rules so that the place would be kept in good order, because they were interested obviously in property. And the engineer who was in charge, somebody called Eduardo Palamo, he asked Maria Montessori if she would take on this group of children that otherwise were left free to wander the building and vandalize it, because they weren't old enough to go to school, but they were old enough to stay out of the house while their parents went off looking for work and so on. And so we always used to say this, it was almost like a defense against the children, or what the children might do to the building. And so really what they must have had in mind was a sort of daycare facility for these children. He asked Montessori to supervise this, to take charge. And she agrees, but it doesn't mean she's there every day. You know she's not there every day. She goes in about twice a week. The person who's there every day is actually, well, is indicated in different ways, and perhaps it was more than one, there's one and someone else, indicated as a seamstress, as the daughter of the porter, as somebody who had trained as a teacher but never worked as a teacher. So, and somebody who was really, I think it was very serendipitous. There was an adult who was really quite modest and had no great pretensions of her own, but was willing to do what Montessori said. Right, and I leave that there, okay? So what was the greatest stroke of fortune, it seems to me, or highly serendipitous, was that these children were so young. Montessori, why did she take on this project? She had worked with atypical children because of her interest in psychiatry. She found these children that were abandoned in well, these days we'd say psychiatric clinics. They had less comfortable terms back then. And just abandoned there with adults, right? And nobody was really taking care of these children at all. So I'm just going back a bit now, before I come back to the 1907 children. And so she gathered all these children together and started working with them. And she says, and so she worked with them for a couple of years. Says she dedicated herself to those children, body and soul, heart, mind, soul, and so on. So there she was flat out full time with those earlier children, the atypical children. They must have been of all different sorts of ages, but there were some that were at school age. So she actually, after working with them, and it's then she became interested in materials, because these children could not learn in an abstract way. They could not learn in a traditional way. They'd already been, abandoned, she says, by the educational system. And so that's how she became interested in Sagan. And some of our materials still go back to Sagan. Edouard Sagan, French doctor, that was interesting, another trained doctor, and not an educator. And he developed all sorts of materials. So she starts with Sagan's materials, right? And she understands that those atypical children can learn. They don't have to be abandoned by the education. She says they were abandoned by the medical profession, they were abandoned by educators, but with the help of these materials that Sagan had developed and worked with, used for successful work himself. He'd done successful work with special needs children. Anyway, using those materials, the children learn so much that she puts the ones that she can into a state exam. Okay, a state exam together with all the other children who are doing traditional education. And her children do as well as the other children. And everybody is so impressed and was reported on papers and so on. And she was asked, how could you bring about such a miracle? And she said, well, I haven't brought about a miracle. Perhaps you brought about a miracle with your children. Only did as well as mine, something like that. So she became interested in, what if she used that same approach of using material with typical children? What would happen then? What capacities might they reveal if they had those opportunities? And that's why she's interested in this project that's offered to her, and she takes it on. But as she says herself, she is amazed, at what, in the end, is to be observed. That she either observes herself or that she's the observations of this person who's there all the time, who reports back to her all the time. The observations that are made and the discoveries that are made. And that's what's listed here. So, this is in part 2, right, of the Secret of Childhood and New Education, chapter 2, our own method, how it originated, who are you, the first children, what they show me. And what does she say here? Repetition of the exercise. So she was totally surprised that when these children were really working with focus, with concentration, with maximum effort, that actually what they started to do was to repeat. And there was a repetition which was an evident repetition, right? A rather exact repetition of whatever they were working with. So that's a surprise. And it meant that they kept working at something. She said, she, like other adults, had this misconception that young children couldn't focus for very long. So just let's remind ourselves for a moment of who these children are. Okay? Because the ages here, they're not school age. They couldn't be put in for school exams. They're preschool children. The ages go from 3 to 6. Now that's really serendipitous. The reason is that we're familiar with the first plane of development, we know that that's when the transformation within the children can reveal itself quite quickly. Okay. She says that she too had believed the children were going to focus very fleetingly on things, not a long engagement span or concentration span. Yet these children could focus for quite a long time when they worked with these materials, right? So, and this maximum effort revealed itself through repetition of the exercise, as well as through the evident focus that we could see, the fact that they were concentrating. She gives examples of that we're all familiar with somewhat. Anyway, next thing that she noticed was feeling for order. Children are really interested in order. It's so true that at first, the person in charge would open a cupboard and take out materials and distribute them to the children. So one child would get this material, another child would get that material, another child would get that material. And then she noticed, and she reported to Montessori, that the children would crowd around her, and they were so interested. They were so interested where the materials went. They were so interested, in sort of taking the materials, not waiting for her to distribute the materials and so on. Montessori's original instruction to the person who was with these children all the time is that the children should be happy. That's what she said originally. I personally think that's marvelous, Children should be happy. Because it means you have to look at the children, you have to observe the children. And surely, if there's something, a healthy process, a natural process going on, then it's going to reveal itself. It's going to show its symptoms. What its symptoms, if you like, will be happiness. Okay? Anyway, so it was this being for order that they had and this interest they had in where the materials were and being able to take the material themselves rather than having the so-called mistress decide who was going to work with what, that led to the next thing that we see in this, free choice. It was clear that the children were showing, to be observed, they wanted to choose for themselves. So this then led to an approach which offers free choice. So there you get that, the beginning of freedom for children. That's so important. And just so I don't forget to say it later, I'm going to say it now. Montessori, as time went by, Montessori gives many ideas of what she understands by education, right? Education as a help to life, education as a help to developing life. Some people say aid to life, but it's always the same. But what she actually also says is the freedom to develop normally. But what education has to offer is the freedom to develop normally, which we can translate to the freedom to develop naturally. Right? So this important of freedom, which we know is not an unlicensed freedom, but it's a freedom that includes very, very many important freedoms. Freedom to choose, to take, which means that the material has to be there, available to the children and not in the way of it. The freedom to work with the material that's been chosen for as long as one wishes. Now, when you can choose for yourself, it means that there's interest there. And interest leads to spontaneous work. There is no spontaneous work if the interest isn't there. Then it's imposed work. And it's a duty and a fatigue. But spontaneous work is a joy. Spontaneous work refreshes. That was Montessori's experience for us. It refreshes, it doesn't fatigue the children. Because even if the children don't consciously know about development or consciously know about being driven by nature, they're pushed by nature to take what they need in order to develop themselves. And that means that there's a very deep, passionate kind of interest which keeps the individual focused, working and repeating until something within is satisfied. And then that's good way. No adult can know. It's like no adult can know how hungry someone else is and when they're satisfied. Right? So it's also the freedom to work for as long as one wishes and the freedom to stop working at that activity as well. And then, of course, other freedoms come along later as well. Oh, the next thing we see in the list is they never chose toys. No, because toys are really fleeting interest. There's nothing really that one can do with toys, usually, and I don't want to be too dogmatic about this, usually that enables one to grow and develop oneself, right? So what's interesting though is that there were toys in the environment at the time. So it's through experimentation and conservation that children never went to the toys. Okay, they would go back and back and back again from one day to the next, from one week to the next, to the materials that she's devising on the basis of Sagan's original materials. And it's that determines in the end what is kept within the environment, what is discarded. Because there's no